Microexpressions. You've probably heard that liars flash a tiny look on their face before they catch themselves. That's not a myth, it's a real phenomenon, and it's called a microexpression. It's a burst of true emotion that flickers across someone's face in under half a second before their brain manages to slap a mask back on. Fear, disgust, contempt. It leaks out in a flash and then vanishes like it was never there. Here's why it matters so much. Your face is run by two different systems, one voluntary, one not. The voluntary one can fake a smile all day long. The involuntary one fires before you even decide to lie. So for a fraction of a second, the truth genuinely escapes, whether the person wants it to or not. Here's the part that ruins the myth, though. Most people, even trained professionals, catch these flashes at a rate barely better than a coin flip. The technique is real. Your ability to actually use it in real time, sitting across from someone, is a lot weaker than every crime drama wants you to believe. Baselining. Before you can catch a lie, you need to know what the truth looks like on that specific person. And that's the whole idea behind baselining. Every human being has a default, a resting voice, a normal blink rate, a habit of touching their neck when they're relaxed. Interrogators and negotiators don't walk in hunting for lies. First, they just watch. They ask easy, low-stakes questions, and they quietly log what normal looks like for this one person in this one room. Here's why that first step is everything. A person who talks with their hands constantly isn't lying when they gesture more. That's just their baseline. The tell isn't the behavior itself, it's the deviation from it. So the real skill isn't spotting fidgeting or eye contact. It's noticing the exact moment someone stops acting like themselves. Skip the baseline, and you're not reading a liar. You're just reading a stranger and guessing. Cognitive load. Here's a technique that doesn't even bother watching the face. It goes straight for the brain, and it's called exploiting cognitive load. Telling the truth is cheap for your mind. You just open a memory file and read it out. Lying is expensive. You have to invent a story, keep it consistent, remember what you already said, and monitor how you look while doing all of it at once. That's a lot of plates spinning. So investigators load on extra weight on purpose. They'll ask someone to tell their story backward, starting from the end and working toward the beginning. Here's the part that breaks people. A true memory can run in reverse almost as easily as forward because it's a real, stored event. A fabricated story usually can't. The liar built it forward, in order, like a script, and running it backward makes the whole structure collapse in real time, right in front of you. Duping delight. Some liars aren't nervous at all. They're actually enjoying themselves. And there's a name for that too, duping delight. It's the flash of pleasure some people get from successfully pulling one over on someone else. A tiny smirk, a flicker of a smile at completely the wrong moment, a little spark in the eyes while delivering devastating news. It shows up most in people who are confident, who see the lie as a game they're winning. Here's the unsettling part. This is one of the few tells that isn't stress at all. It's the opposite. It's satisfaction leaking through the cracks. Watch interviews with con artists after they're caught, and you'll sometimes see it in the old footage. A smile that has no business being there. The lie itself might be flawless. The pleasure of getting away with it is what gives them away. Statement analysis. Forget the face entirely for a second, because some of the most reliable clues live in the actual words someone chooses, and that's the core of statement analysis. Liars, without realizing it, often distance themselves from their own story using language. They'll drop pronouns, saying "went to the store" instead of "I went to the store," subtly detaching themselves from the action. They'll swap definite language for vague hedges, sort of, basically, to be honest, stacked in sentences that didn't need them. Here's the pattern investigators actually hunt for. Truthful accounts tend to be messy, full of unnecessary detail, corrections, and tangents, because real memory is cluttered. Fabricated accounts tend to be suspiciously clean, smooth, and chronological because it's a rehearsed script, not a memory. So paradoxically, the neat, tidy story is often the one worth doubting, and the rambling, disorganized one is often the one that's true. The convincing statement. Somewhere in the middle of an honest denial, most people naturally reach for something investigators call a convincing statement. It's an unprompted line where the person seems to genuinely need you to believe them, not just state the facts. Something like, "Why would I do that? I have a family. I have too much to lose." Here's why it's telling. It's not part of the direct answer to the question asked. It's an emotional plea bolted on, and truthful people produce these fairly often because their innocence genuinely bothers them when it's doubted. Liars, weirdly, tend to skip this step. They stick to the script, answer exactly what was asked, and never bother trying to actually convince you of anything beyond the bare denial. The absence of that extra emotional push is sometimes louder than anything they actually said. The polygraph problem. You'd assume the machine built specifically to catch liars would be the gold standard, But the polygraph has a dirty secret. It isn't measuring lies at all. It's measuring stress, heart rate, sweat, breathing, blood pressure, spikes and dips as questions get asked. Here's the flaw that never goes away. A completely innocent person can be terrified of being disbelieved, and that terror produces the exact same physical spikes as guilt. Meanwhile, a practiced liar who feels zero remorse can sail through calm as glass. Countermeasures exist too: biting your tongue, clenching muscles, doing math in your head to manipulate the readings on purpose. Here's the part that shocks people. Polygraph results are considered so unreliable that most courts in the world won't even accept them as evidence. The machine everyone associates with catching liars is technically catching anxiety, and anxiety and guilt are not the same thing. Pupil dilation. Here's a tell almost nobody can consciously control, and it's happening in your eyes without your permission. Pupil dilation. When your brain works harder, whether that's solving a math problem or fabricating a lie on the spot, your pupils widen slightly, an automatic response tied straight to your nervous system. Lying takes more mental effort than telling the truth. So, in controlled lab settings, liars' pupils measurably dilate more than truth tellers do. Here's why this one is actually promising. Unlike a lot of body language myths, this response is involuntary, at a level almost nobody can fake or suppress on command. The catch is brutal though. You need lab conditions, controlled lighting, and precise measurement to actually see it reliably. Across a table in a dim room, the human eye simply cannot catch a millimeter of dilation. The tell is real. Your ability to spot it with the naked eye basically isn't. Illustrator gestures. Watch someone's hands while they talk, and you'll notice something called illustrators, the natural gestures people use to paint their story in the air as they tell it. Here's the strange thing research keeps finding. When people lie, these gestures often drop off sharply. It sounds backward. You'd think a nervous liar would fidget more, but it's the opposite because of that same cognitive load we already talked about. Managing a fabricated story eats up so much mental bandwidth that the spontaneous, unconscious hand gestures that normally accompany real memory retrieval simply don't fire. Here's the twist that trips up amateurs. Increased fidgeting, tapping, and touching the face is often just anxiety, and anxious truth tellers do it constantly. A sudden stillness, hands going quiet and controlled mid-story, is actually the more reliable signal buried in the noise. Voice pitch. Your voice carries information your face never will, and one of the more consistent findings in deception research involves pitch. Under stress, the muscles around your vocal cords tighten involuntarily, and that tension pushes your voice slightly higher, often without you noticing it happening to your own voice in real time. Investigators trained in this will listen for a shift upward in pitch on specific answers compared to the baseline voice established earlier in the conversation. Here's why it's such a useful tell. Almost nobody thinks to control their pitch because almost nobody knows this is even being measured. People rehearse their words, their expression, sometimes even their posture. They never rehearse the exact frequency of their own voice. So the one channel nobody bothers to manage becomes one of the more quietly reliable ones in the entire toolkit, the 46% problem. Here's the number that should humble every detective show on television. Decades of research, hundreds of studies, thousands of participants, and the average person's ability to tell truth from lies sits right around 54%. Barely better than flipping a coin. Even trained professionals, police officers, judges, customs agents, only edge slightly higher, and only in narrow specific conditions. Here's the part that stings. Most people are extremely confident in their lie-detecting instincts, and that confidence has almost no relationship to their actual accuracy. We believe we're good at this because we remember the times we were right and quietly forget the times we were wrong. The uncomfortable truth under all these techniques is that no single one of them alone reliably catches a liar. They only tilt the odds slightly in a game most of us are already losing without realizing it. Contradiction under retelling. If there's one technique that actually holds up again and again, it's this one: asking someone to tell their story more than once, out of order, days apart, without warning. It's called contradiction under retelling, and it works because of how memory and fabrication behave completely differently over time. A true memory, retold weeks later, might shift slightly in small, unimportant details, but the core structure stays locked in place because it's an actual stored event. A fabricated story has to be reconstructed from scratch each time, pulled from imagination rather than memory, and small but critical details start drifting. Here's the part interrogators rely on most. It's not the big dramatic contradiction that gives someone away, it's usually a tiny one. A detail about timing or sequence that quietly doesn't match the first version. The liar isn't defeated by a clever question. They're defeated by their own memory simply not existing. Closing thought. Put all of these together, the microexpressions, the baseline, the cognitive load, the pupils, the pitch, the pronouns, and you still don't get a lie detector. You get a slightly better set of odds. That's genuinely the whole truth of it. There is no single tell, no folded arms, no shifty eyes, no single sentence that proves deception on its own. Every real technique used by professionals stacks small, imperfect signals on top of each other and looks for a pattern, not a moment. Here's the part worth sitting with. The people who are best at lying aren't the ones who never show a tell. They're the ones who've simply practiced enough that their fabricated story starts behaving like a real memory, which means, in the end, the most dangerous liar was never the nervous one sweating across the table. It was the one who told the story so many times, even they started to believe it.